Good day to all of the Fantasy Flyer followers. My name is Derek, and with me always is Taylor. Taylor, what's going on in your world?
Not too much. Excited for week 3 of football. I know we kind of already gotten away with Thursday night football, but last week was just such a crapshoot. I'm really hoping for a better week, and it looks like we have some exciting games. So definitely looking forward to it.
I would agree with that sentiment entirely. Some really good matchups. Some others, that are some teams get to rebound, and I may not personally be so much interested in. But there's always good football to be played. So
yeah.
As always with our fantasy flyer, we will start off with our 9 segment, our news, injury, notes, etc. I'd let you take it away, Taylor. I think this is more up your alley.
Sure. Yeah, we got a lot here, so I'll kind of brush through it. We'll start with some guys that are out. Rondale Moore, he's been out for a bit, so not too much different there. Look out for the Dortch. Sammy Watkins is out. He actually had a decent game last week, so we'll have to see what the targets go this week. We'll talk about that when we get to the Packers and Bucks. Chris Godwin on the other side of that game out. So yeah, we'll talk about that some more. Hunter Renfrow still going through concussion protocols. He is out. Kyle Phillips, the rookie with Tennessee, is doubtful. So maybe some bump up for Burks and Woods there. DeAndre Swift with his ankle is questionable. He did return to practice, so that's hopefully that seems like it's trending upwards. Gabe Davis is questionable, but according to him, he'll play. So I don't know. Take that with a grain of salt. Dawson Knox with his foot injury is questionable. Haven't really read too much more on this, but something to monitor. I actually made the mistake of not playing Njoku over Knox, hoping that Knox would play, thinking Njoku was not quite there yet, but obviously he had a great game. Dalton Schultz is questionable and did not practice on Thursday, so not great. I didn't see what his status was on Friday today, but definitely keep an eye on that. James Conner, ankle questionable. So we talked about this. Darrell Williams and Eno Benjamin, guys to look out for there. Justin Herbert, unfortunately with his ribs, we saw how he finished that game and was wincing and struggling to make some plays and then throwing some darts. So it sounds like he's been throwing all week, and it's just a matter of can he function in a game-like scenario? The biggest thing I'll note here is Chase Daniel took the first team reps on Friday, so I don't want to say that that's bad news for Herbert. I just want to say that definitely keep an eye on this if you're a Herbert owner. Not quite sure what's happening there. Keenan Allen with his hamstring is still questionable. Which is kind of funky because they were talking to can't remember if it was him or the coach, probably Keenan, after the game that he got hurt, and they said, "Do you think you'll be ready for the next game?" He said, "I think I should be able to make it." And he's like, "It's on Thursday." He's like, "Maybe we'll see." So he was pretty hopeful when it first happened, but now he's still questionable. So keep an eye on that. But it's like I said, it's kind of funky. I would think that he would be trending towards playing. Jerry Jeudy, shoulder and ribs. I thought it was initially just his shoulder, but he is still questionable, but has been back at practice, so that's good news. Hopefully he's in there. Josh Jacobs had an illness, did not practice Friday, but I don't know. It doesn't say how severe the illness is, but he's listed as questionable. I would imagine he probably plays. TJ Hawkinson, hip, questionable, limited in practice. Not too much there. Just keep an eye on him. Christian Watson, Randall Cobb, both questionable. Randall Cobb with an illness as well, so probably see him on the field. Christian Watson, hamstring. So that one definitely more to keep an eye on there. Tampa Bay, holy crap, they are struggling to keep people on the field. Julio Jones with his
Struggle
knee.
bus.
Yeah, Russell Gage, hamstring, Fournette, hamstring. They are all questionable. We already talked about Chris Godwin being out, and the suspension of Mike Evans. The appeal was the suspension is being upheld, so his appeal did not work out the way he wanted, which I don't know what he was thinking. So Mike Evans is also out. J.K. Dobbins still questionable. Looks like he's been practicing for 2 straight weeks now, but obviously they want to make sure he's good to go. So keep an eye on that. Even if he plays, I would be hesitant to put him in my fantasy lineup. They'll probably have him on a pitch count.
Agreed.
Hayden Hurst, groin, questionable. I mean, tight end landscape is crapshoot, but he's been one of the better ones, so I'm sure people have him. Want to keep an eye on that status. Jacoby Myers, this so one of the guys that we actually mentioned possibly picking up on the waiver wire, because he's getting a lot of targets and receptions are king in PPR.
Right.
But he is questionable with some knee issues that they actually did some tests on, I believe, Wednesday. So that is not looking too good for him. Definitely keep an eye on that if you did pick him up.
Right.
The Saints, Jameis Winston back and ankle. He's questionable, and Alvin Kamara ribs is questionable. So, I mean, the way that the lack of news around this kind of makes me think it's not as bad. So they'll probably both be in there, but that would really suck to have both of those guys out. Does that mean Taysom Hill, who's actually also questionable, would take over as QB? I'm not really sure that they've been practicing him that way.
I think you'd be looking at Andy Dalton
Oh,
for
right. I
the
forgot about him.
most. Yeah, well, we try to. But Jameis has been limited, and I don't think that means anything. Alvin's been limited. They both still got Q tags right now, so
Yeah.
it's kind of one of those situations where you keep an eye on it. We'll talk a little more about the New Orleans later because they have some very interesting things they've done in 2 games, despite only being 1-1.
Yeah. Yeah, a couple others, Wan'Dale Robinson and Kadarius Toney, both questionable. I mean, the Giants are getting it done with other people that some people might have said were no names. So I don't think this is too much here. You haven't played these guys yet, really. Corey Davis. This one, like, I mean, the Jets are like an unfortunate sort of situation you don't necessarily want to touch from a fantasy standpoint, but at the same time, they have had some producers. So Corey Davis actually being one of those guys. So something to keep an eye on here. Maybe Garrett Wilson or Elijah Moore take a step up in targets and whatnot if he is out. I mean, Elijah Moore obviously being a decent snap percentage, I think. So he may do pretty well with Davis out. And then these last two, what's that?
I said if he's out.
if he's out, it's questionable. These last two, just some minor notes from a team standpoint. 49ers signed Tevin Coleman to the practice squad. We mentioned, I think, on Tuesday's show that Marlon Mack was activated off the practice squad to the active roster, and so getting more depth there for them, which they definitely need. And then the Ravens signed JPP, Jason Pierre-Paul, and are interested in Blake Martinez. So trying to get a little more there for their defense. Yeah, that's a
lot of news,
a lot to chew.
a lot of notes. Yes, there's some. I'm like, there's an insane amount of Q tags going into the weekend, which is probably. I mean, this is probably a little above average for what we'll see most of the year, but
hopefully
there are some big, there's some big players that are probably going to be out or trying to just make the cut to play, and others that are on their way back. So, interesting things to consider as we go forward. Let's real quick review the Thursday night game. I'll be honest with you, I didn't pay much close attention to it. I was not. It's a thing. We all have lives. I'm going to let the fantasy fly crowd down a little bit. It is the way it is. I'm just going to be honest. I did keep track of the box score. I know that a fumble recovery touchdown ended the game, which is
It was over before that, but yeah.
yeah. Well, it looked like they were on like the Pittsburgh was on like their 15-yard line. They had to go 85 yards in the last play, and yeah, that wasn't going to happen. But then they made it worse.
Right.
Went from being 17 to 23 to 17 to 29.
Mhm.
I saw that Jalen Warren was fairly decent. I saw, of course, I think everybody saw George Pickens' crazy catch. It's been a little overhyped, I think, in the 24 hours since that's happened. He had 39 yards on 3 catches, and 36 of them came on that one catch, which was amazing. Let's not shorten the catch, or shorten the play. But what did you notice? It seems like Jacoby Brissett was keeping Cleveland as the shock number 1 offense in the NFL right now. Don't know how that, and it's not even all Jacoby Brissett. Nick Chubb is the number 1 fantasy player out there. He is scoring touchdowns left and right. He is running the ball for an insane amount of yards. He's breaking tackles. I think I saw something earlier. He had 113 yards last night, and 102 of them were after contact.
Oh
Which,
wow.
if you're gonna do that, it's going to be tough to beat you. So, and then Amari Cooper had 100 yards and a touchdown, which was a little more than I expected out of them. So, anything else that you noticed from this game? Any takeaways from you, someone who actually had eyes on the football game for a little longer than I did in the highlights?
Yeah, I mean, as you kind of noticed from the box score and his rating, Jacoby Brissett actually played pretty decently. He seems to be getting more comfortable with the team, the schemes, and trending in the right direction. So we were talking about this before the show, but if he can keep them on a decent track and get them sort of in the hunt for the playoffs, and they do actually, I don't see why they make the switch to Deshaun Watson when he comes back, or the week after he comes back, if they want to give him some more time to get acclimated. I mean, he can start practicing a couple weeks before he's actually able to play. So yeah, I would imagine they make that switch. But the point being, Jacoby Brissett and the way that Chubb is playing, even I mean Hunt and Njoku and Cooper, like Njoku had a great game. If they can keep all these pieces moving and working, I think they're actually in an okay spot, or pretty solid spot, once Watson comes back. So it's not totally what I expected, but I guess a pleasant surprise, especially for Cleveland.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting to see. I mean, I saw at some point, I think it was around halftime, might have been before, might have been after. It was like 14-14. And I was
Yeah, it
like,
was
all
like
right, this is a
14-17, or yeah,
14-13,
it was
whatever it was.
they missed a field goal, so yeah, probably 14-13 or something like that at halftime. It was definitely a close game, mostly due to in the first half, due to Cleveland actually playing decent D, but also maybe Mitch playing bad.
I
So I
heard a
wouldn't I
little.
wouldn't throw it all on, or I wouldn't give Cleveland all the credit because Mitch wasn't great.
Right. I heard something. I was listening to the radio, my NFL Sirius, and they said something about is any of this on Mitchell Trubisky? And of course, me having very little eyes on the game, it was it's kind of a moot point for me to listen to, I suppose. He was 20 for 32 with 207 yards. So he didn't have any other stats. So I mean, was he
Yeah,
fantastic as a quarterback? No. Was he bad? No. Like
he ran
we
one
just saw.
in.
Yeah, he had the run in, which is, I don't know how the play developed, whether it was schemed or whether he just found his way into the end zone.
That's a good question.
But
I don't recall.
I didn't watch it, and I don't think anyone, if either way, I don't think I'd really want to watch the play. It's probably more bad defense than good offense. And let's just be honest, Mitch Trubisky's not really a runner. He's not a Josh Allen, a Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts. But I don't understand quite the thought process on. And again, this is coming from somebody who has Kenny Pickett on their team. I don't understand why they're so quick to jump on the Mitch Trubisky get him out train. Because they lost a football game 17-20, really 17-23. Like he didn't cause the last 6 points. It wasn't like a pick six or something like that. It was some
Yeah.
bad laterals that turned into I think Denzel Ward had it in the end zone. So I feel like Mitch did an okay job looking at the stats. That's really all I can say about it for right now. I'm interested to see what Mike Tomlin wants to do going forward. There were chants of Kenny Pickett, and Mike Tomlin said, "I'm not in a mindset to make that change on the quarterback right now," which is fair. You don't want to do that hastily after a game. Like, honestly, it's kind of stupid of the media to ask him that, but I don't see why Mitch Trubisky shouldn't start week 4.
Yeah, I don't think you make the switch yet. That being said, I do think that they make the switch at some point this year. I don't think that Trubisky is going to get it done the way he's been playing. And I mean, Tomlin's a good coach, but coach can only take you so far. And I just don't think that. I mean, obviously Trubisky's not the answer, but I don't think that he's at least the answer for this season. I think that at some point you got to see what they have in Pickett within reason. Like, don't put him out on like, if you're losing, you're not going to make the playoffs. Wait until there's like a game where you can give Pickett some confidence. Don't throw him out against a team that's going to demolish him. But I think at some point this year he does come out. But yeah, I mean, going back to the game itself, Najee looked a lot better. I think he stiff-armed some guy to get into the end zone, and his average yardage was like, I think he had 2.3 last week, and this week he had 3.7, which
much more
is
average.
like, more average. It's not great, but it's better. You do want to see him get more involved. In the passing game, he only had 3 receptions, 3 targets as
3
well.
targets.
So
Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, you kind of want to see that up around like 6-ish, because he is a good pass catcher. And when you're down, you would want to see him sort of provide that that check down or what have you when needed. But that being said, it looks like they like Jalen Warren. I mean, they continue to use him, and he's doing pretty well actually. So I don't actually know. They only targeted him once, so
Anyways, he had a
anyways.
little bit of a spark in the run game. 4 for 30. It's 7.5. He has a spot in the offense, but it's nowhere near Najee Harris.
Yeah.
Also, that fumble at the end was only Pittsburgh's second away this year. Only turned the ball over twice now. So
yeah, well, and actually, I mean, like, that was literally just they threw the ball like 10-ish, 15 yards to Deontay, and then he lateraled to somebody who lateraled to somebody else, and then they fumbled the ball. Yeah. Oh, Najee was the one that fumbled.
Yeah, he gets the fumble lost, and the only
Yep.
one recovered, of course, Denzel Ward. He gets a touchdown. So
Yeah.
it is the way it's that's the way it works when you're trying to lateral it and pull a
with the
pull
like
a
20
miracle like
seconds
that.
left. Yeah.
If that, I think the game ended at zeros with him in the end zone, with Denzel Ward in the end zone. So, but yeah, interesting to see the Browns, see if they can keep going with this. I'm sure if they can, and Deshaun Watson can slip right in, this team will be very, very formidable going into the playoffs, because it looks like you don't even have your QB1 and you're winning pretty decisively.
Yeah.
And then the Steelers, unfortunately, I talked about this in a lot of preseason. I said I don't see them winning more than 8 or 9 games, and I'm sticking with that number. This was a game where I thought they would probably win, but it is what it is. It's Pittsburgh. They have room to come back, and that's about all it is. So
yeah.
Anything else to add, or are you wrapped up?
One quick tidbit that was sort of interesting. Pickens apparently before the game said something about like always being open and I don't know, wanting to have them throw him the ball more or something. And the first like few plays or run, or what do you call it, first drive, Tomlin sat him. So
Well, I mean,
Tomlin's not putting up with that.
Even when he put him on the field, he had 7 targets, so he's not always open because he only caught 3 of them. So either you're dropping them or you're not always open.
Yeah.
So either way, shut up. That was another thing that they said on Sirius, and I'm not gonna keep dwelling on this, but they said he needs to shut his mouth and play football.
Yeah.
For a rookie, you are arguably the wide receiver 3 on this team. And if pass catchers, you're probably 4th behind Freiermuth. So, like, earn your way. Sit there, take your bumps, and don't keep opening your mouth. And to have 4 of your 7 targets not go to you for whatever reason, just shut up. You have work to do. Like that's the bottom line.
Yeah.
Moving forward, we're going to move on to our week 3 preview. And we will start off with the 1:00 games, of course. The Bills and the Dolphins. And Buffalo is 2-0. Dolphins 2-0. Buffalo favored by 5.5 points. The over/under is 53 for this game, and it is the very first.
It's time to
of our host v. host.
Kicking
games.
it off with a host v host. I like it.
Yeah, well, this is a big matchup. Let's just be straightforward. The Bills are the 2nd best offense in the league so far. The Dolphins are the 7th, and that really only reflects the first game where they got out of the gate kind of slow. Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer are out for Buffalo, which is probably pretty big blows to the hopes of providing any kind of containment for Waddle or Hill. I mean, it doesn't make it impossible, but it makes it more difficult not having that experience and that talent out there. Buffalo's coming off of a stomping of the Tennessee Titans, and Buffalo's game plan it's basically been to stop the opponent as far as getting any means of quarterback contain, and I don't know if that'll be so easy with Tua. Miami, like I said, 7th in total offense. Waddle and Hill both had over 140 yards. 190 yards. Which number am I messing up for last week?
Last
I know
week
they had 2 touchdowns.
They had over 150, I believe.
A piece, right?
Yeah, I mean, more than that. I think that was just there was like this stat about 2 players on one team having XXX and 150. Yeah, but 190 right. Tyreek had.
Yeah, and they both were. They soaked up, like, what was it, 32 of the 50 passes, or 35 of the 50 passes from Tua, or some crazy number. And I don't think there's any reason to believe those aren't his first, second, third, and fourth options on any passing play. Like, double check, because things have changed since the last time you looked at whoever you thought you could throw it at. On the other side, Stephon Diggs is the wide receiver 1 through 2 weeks. Caught 3 touchdowns and had 148 yards on 14 targets, 12 catches last week against Tennessee, and he didn't even play the fourth quarter. So, or he played a little in the fourth quarter. That was about it. So, I would imagine he would probably draw Xavier Howard. It just kind of comes down to how Miami thinks they're going to contain the pass game. I don't think you're going to have to worry much about Singletary or James Cook or Zach Moss, but more or less, can you undermine the throwing arm of Josh Allen? And then it's the same on the other side, coming back and forth.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting that Miami has such a powerful duo in Hill and Waddle, and then you're up against Buffalo, which is like the complete package, solid offense, solid defense. But if Gabe Davis is out, if Dawson Knox is out, and all you have, I won't say all you have, but Diggs is at that point your biggest weapon that gives Miami somebody to focus on. Granted, like, Miami's defense is, I would say, middle of the road probably. I don't know. Yeah, I think the Bills hopefully have a lot more weapons coming into this game. Because if you just have Singletary and Diggs, that might be a little tough. I mean, you don't just have Singletary and Diggs. You have Josh Allen, which is an incredible asset. And his running. Go ahead. I was just gonna say his running game brings like another aspect to their offense that a lot of teams don't have, but Tua can run too. So I struggled with this in terms of, like,
I'm in the same boat.
Yeah, they can both put up a lot of points, but do the Bills have all their pieces? I think, like I said, if you think of Miami as a middle of the road defense and the Bills don't have all their pieces, they still could eke out the win. But with Miami being healthy and having those incredible wide receiver tandem, yeah, I'm still going back and forth in my head.
Well, I'm. It's interesting that you bring up the running game because we saw what Lamar Jackson did to the Dolphins last week. Now the Dolphins ended up winning, of course, but Lamar Jackson had 270 or 80 yards, I think, throwing, and 120 on the ground, and a whole bunch of touchdowns. Lamar Jackson is leading the league in depth of pass right now. He's beyond Jameis Winston by about, I think it's a third of a yard per pass on average. So when he's chucking it like that in a contract year, that's interesting that he's going to break out his legs because Josh Allen has a similar ability to throw that football, and he can break out his legs too. I'm going with Buffalo in this game. I know they're favored by 5.5. I see it as being right around that 53 mark myself, but I think Buffalo squeaks out the win. I think I don't think Diggs is the number one wide receiver in this game. I think either Waddle or Hill are, depending on how the defense works. But I think Diggs is going to end up with another touchdown. I think the hidden value here is probably either if Gabriel Davis is out, you could look at Jake Kumro, who had quietly a very solid game against the Titans on Monday night, or Dawson Knox, of course. So I wouldn't go out of my way for value on either one of them. But as far as Diggs goes, you can put money on him as much as Waddle and Hill. I'll take Buffalo on this one. Score's a little tough. I'll take Buffalo 33, Miami 30.
Okay. So
that's even a little higher than I want to go, but that's
you're going over. Okay.
Yep.
I went under, but I took Buffalo on the spread. So I have the Bills 27, Dolphins 21. Just kind of thinking that the Bills have a solid D. Obviously, Hyde and Poyer being out is not great, but Von Miller getting in there and disrupting things. I think that Tua doesn't have an easy time. Doesn't have as easy a time getting the ball out to where he wants consistently, and therefore kind of stifles their offense a little bit. And then I think, like I said, the Bills just have sort of a complete package: solid defense, solid offense, and they end up winning this.
Okay. I won't be playing Von Miller this weekend. I feel like that for some reason I feel like he's not going to get to Tua as much as I want to play him in our dynasty league. But as much as I want doesn't mean he won't.
Yeah.
bit of a difference there. But no, very interesting take. Even with the defense, I mean, we saw what happened with Tua in the first half last week. He threw 2 interceptions on forced passes, and he ended up with 6 touchdowns, and I think 5 of them came in the second half. But
yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I think anything close to anything with Tua's arm being questionable like that again, you may be very close. So, moving on to our next game, much less interesting, unfortunately. Bengals 0-2 at the Jets 1-1. Cincinnati are 6-point favorites. Over under is at 45. Some interesting things going on with both of these teams. The Bengals, well, I guess they're much less interesting. Their O-line has just been atrocious through 2 games. Joe Burrow is literally 31st in air yards per pass attempt, and he just doesn't have time to sit there and find someone or let routes develop, let passes develop. He hasn't for most of the season. Like, Dallas got to him several times last week. Week 1, it wasn't much better. The O-line had troubles. I mean, they just have troubles. Let's just say that. And it's clearly affecting Jamar Chase's output. if the Jets put in any more pressure on the O-line, you could see a repeat of the last 2 weeks. And I don't know really where the difference lies with this Bengals offensive line. Meanwhile, on the other side for the Jets, you have a stud set of receivers that seem to have emerged in a Super Bowl Joe Flacco, who's the number 3 quarterback in yardage through 2 weeks. So I don't think this Jets team will stop throwing it. I think he's thrown, 59 and 40. He's thrown about 100 passes in 2 games. So going to be very successful. Elijah Moore played 33% more snaps than Wilson, but Wilson had the production. So Elijah Moore is still technically the wide receiver 1 here. Wilson just had the red zone targets. Moore leads the NFL with 99 routes run. But Wilson's obviously extra usage last week helped him score big fantasy points. I would not hesitate to keep playing the two-headed game at running back if I was the Jets. Michael Carter saw 67% of snaps, had less fantasy points than Breece Hall because of the touchdown. So it's working out for them as far as the running back game goes. I believe CJ Uzama comes back this week. He'll get plenty of chance to work himself back into this offense. If Corey Davis is in or out, I don't think that really changes the offense anything if I'm the Jets. So I don't think Cincinnati will run away with this one, but I do think Cincinnati has a good chance to win their first game of the year.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that. And I mean, they kind of have to 0-2. Their playoff chances are dwindling. Yeah, I don't know that I honestly have too much to add. I think you covered a lot of it. It seems like I said, I think on the Tuesday show, Wilson, quote unquote, has arrived. Elijah Moore is obviously a very talented player. So yeah, I think Corey Davis being out doesn't change things too much, other than like Flacco seemed to really favor him, even though I wouldn't have said that he is the number 1 on this team, to your point. Yeah, I think the Bengals just really need to give Burrow more time and allow him to actually connect with his guys, Higgins and Chase, that is. Mixon's been pretty decent, so it's not like they don't have the pieces. I mean, clearly they have the pieces. They were at the Super Bowl. Yeah, I don't need to belabor anything more than that. I think you covered most of it.
Perfect. I'm going with I'm going to go with the Bengals in this one. I mean, I'll give it like a 22 to 27. I'll say 27-22 Bengals. I'm just going to throw out a number. You don't have to if you don't want to. I think it's more interesting.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about a particular score for this game, but I could
You don't have
get
to.
behind the Bengals winning.
They're due. I mean,
Yeah.
the Jets let the Browns do what they did last week. The Bengals the offensive line just needs a couple of plays to get going, or some holes for Mixon, and it can happen. So
yeah.
On to the Raiders and the Titans. Both teams are 0-2. At the end of this week, one of the teams will not have a 0 in the win column. Tennessee is favored by 2.5 points, which is kind of surprising because we just saw them get absolutely trounced by the Buffalo Bills. I think Malik Willis is still standing in the middle of Buffalo trying to throw a pass. Over under in this game is 45.5. I like this game from the standpoint that the Raiders have a little bit. I think both teams have something to prove. The Raiders have a little bit to prove as far as, can you continue to pass to different points on the field without Hunter Renfrow is going to be out this week. I think you mentioned that in our 9 segment.
Mm-hmm.
But he's going to be out. So you're down to Mac Hollins, who led the team in receiving last week, who will probably fill in for him, and there's no reason he really shouldn't. But he has really good speed. Devontae Adams can space himself from the defense very easily. And then Darren Waller, who seems to be returning to his form of 2 years ago. Last year was kind of a hiccup. As for the backfield, Josh Jacobs has not produced for the amount of snaps he's seen. He has been in the backfield for 90% of run plays. He has a decreased pass load, but I think that's kind of explained with the other aforementioned, pieces. Touchdowns will make him, make the difference going forward. As far as the Titans go, obviously dreadful outing versus Buffalo. Ryan Tannehill is the QB 27 so far this year, but that includes last week's sputter sleep. Derrick Henry hasn't been producing, but this is an opportunity for Henry to kind of step up. Las Vegas is 27th in allowing fantasy points to the quarterback, and they're 16th to the wide receiver. Other interesting point, and you brought this up, something about Treylon Burks in the 9 segment. If Kyle Phillips is doubtful, I believe, or is questionable because of his shoulder, one of the two.
Doubtful.
Doubtful. They don't use that officially anymore. They don't
Yeah.
use that officially. Yeah, it's questionable. Yeah, it's all right. He's probably doubtful. Treylon Burks is 7th in wide receiver efficiency. He's 5th in most targets per route and 4th in yards after catch per target in the year so far. So for a rookie, he's already showing signs of developing into that A.J. Brown-esque player that they wanted him to be. The only downfall is that there's no offense behind him to move the ball when he's not catching it. So I'm going to take. I looked at it and I don't remember the exact number, but I want to say like 45% of his catches this year, or 55% of his catches have been for first downs. But if you're not getting first downs from anywhere else, like if Derrick Henry who had 28 yards or something last week and was just pitiful on the ground because of how Buffalo's clammed him up, wasn't much better in week 1. If they can't find a different way to move the ball, and that includes Derrick Henry, I don't see how Treylon Burks can really show off his wide receiver 1, so to speak, that he's probably capable of, almost surely capable of.
Yeah. Yeah, he's definitely got the talent. I don't know if there's still some conditioning issues, but he seems pretty decent out there. It's just like you said, around him is not been super fruitful, and not allowing him to sort of flourish. Derrick Henry has been a huge disappointment so far. Has not looked great in my opinion. Hasn't really broken off a crazy run, maybe like 1 for 20 something yards if I recall. So they definitely need to figure out what's going on there. I don't know if it's still recovering from the injury or if he's just not going to be able to get back to quite what he was because of the injury, which is really unfortunate. So they definitely have a lot to figure out, and if that's the case, they need to shift their game plan and not rely on him in the way that they have in the past. But these two teams, like you said, really need to prove something here and figure something out moving forward, because one of them is going to be 0-3 unless they tie. But I think the percentage that I heard was like going back 40 years, if you're 0-2, there's like a 3% chance of making the playoffs. If you go 0-3, it's like you're out. So
It's not good.
Yeah, and it's really unfortunate for the Raiders because I feel like, I mean, they made it to the playoffs last year, yeah. So I feel like the moves they made in the offseason, namely being Adams, like that should have vaulted them into like a potential contender here, and they just have not been able to do it. I mean, they had that close game, but still.
It's interesting to think that a game this early could mean so much, but you look at how the Jaguars and even really how the Texans are playing. 0-3 probably isn't out so much for the Titans, but in the AFC West, 0-3 ain't good, especially when you have to play all 6 games still against the rest of the teams in the AFC West.
Yeah.
We're going to take a break, and we are going to come back for the continued preview of Week 3. Stay tuned. And welcome back to the Fantasy Flyer. My name is Derek, of course, still here with Taylor. We're going to continue on with our preview of the Week 3 slate. We'll go to the Saints, 1-1 Saints. going to Carolina to take on the Panthers, who are 0-2. New Orleans is favored by 2.5 points. The over-under is 41. Got some injury notes here. Obviously, Saints expect Alvin Kamara to make a return. I know he's still questionable, but they're hoping after a couple, I think he took 3 straight limited practices, that he will be able to play on Sunday. Jameis Winston is also questionable. Big issue there is his back, obviously L1 through L4, as we mentioned on the Week 2 show. The real threat of the Saints this year has been, well, we got to call it what it is, the very solid emergence of Michael Thomas, or re-emergence, so to speak. Obviously missing a lot of time over the last 2 years. Thomas has come back, and he has, I believe he's the 23rd best fantasy player so far through 2 weeks, which is important for the Saints, despite them being 1-1. But he's 3 for 3 on red zone targets. Those are worth 19 yards and 3 touchdowns. So he's done his job. Olave, obviously being the deep threat, had a truckload of targets last week. He creates kind of a 2-level attack. If you can get Alvin Kamara back, you could possibly see a 3-level attack if Jameis can stay, even if Jameis doesn't stay healthy. That's a threatening, pass attack. On the other side, Carolina, Baker Mayfield, they're going to try and get their first win. Last week saw the return of a fantasy productive Christian McCaffrey. He interestingly doesn't have a touchdown this year, but that I'm sure is coming. DJ Moore came back to fantasy relevancy and woke up from his slumber. Had a touchdown and I think 4 or 5 targets, 4 or 5 catches, I should say. Both these teams do not defend the pass very well. So far this year, Panthers ranked 19th in pass defense, Saints right behind them at 20th. However, given the difference in the arms, you can kind of think that would favor New Orleans should Jameis Winston play. Anything interesting that you have to add here? I feel like the Saints kind of have the opportunity to go above and beyond 2.5. The Panthers haven't really scored many touchdowns this year. The Saints have come from behind win versus the Falcons in Week 1, and then even last week against Tampa Bay, they didn't play horribly. They just Jameis Winston did, but everybody else really didn't play too bad. So, what do you have to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think to your point, Michael Thomas is playing great. And then honestly, Landry surprised me. And they got the rookie going. So if they get Kamara back out there, I don't really see how the Panthers unfortunately have a chance the way that they've been playing. They have a lot to figure out still, it seems, which is unfortunate because they have some good pieces, and I was not ready to write Baker off, but he has. I don't know if I want to put it all on him, but I wouldn't say he's looked phenomenal. And I hate to fact check you. What's that?
That's being nice.
Yeah. I should have caught this before, but before we started the show, but McCaffrey does have 1 touchdown. He got a rushing touchdown Week 1.
Oh, did he? Okay. I didn't think he had a touchdown. So, all right. So that's a little more relief, I think, for fantasy owners than more than I even recognized.
Yeah, it saved his Week 1, honestly, because they only had 33 yards rushing and 24 receiving.
Yeah, I tried to forget about that week because the stats were so bad. I guess that also means I forgot about the touchdown. So good catch on that one. Kamara, that's the other thing. This over/under and this spread here, they're with Kamara likely not playing. He hasn't been ruled in yet. He hasn't been posted as active. So to me, that's if he's playing, this has got to go up to 5 or 6 points and probably 44 or 45 in the over/under. And that's just, it's going to be a problem. The one interesting thing that I read is that Frankie Louvu, the linebacker for Carolina, has been statistically the 11th best defensive player. Yes, I was thinking to make sure it wasn't just linebackers. But yeah, defensive player, 11th best on the year. He's only allowed 25 yards on 7 targets. So positive for the Carolina Panthers. I'm still gonna go Saints here. I'm gonna assume that Alvin Kamara plays, just based on his limited practices and the Q tag. Seems like he's gonna probably bounce up and make the play, maybe on a bit of a pitch count, especially seeing how well Mark Ingram did last week.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Actually, Mark Ingram played pretty decently, so I guess I would mention that in the sort of thought process that if they feel that he can do it again, maybe they rest Kamara. But to your point, everything seems like it's trending for him to play Kamara. That is.
Yeah, that would be my take on it. And if that's the case, I mean, I'm looking at the Saints probably, I'll say 24 to 14. I think the
Oh.
defense for the Saints does a pretty good job, but I think it's going to more than cover the spread, and it'll still be an under. So, moving along, Ravens and Patriots both 1-1. Baltimore favored by 2.5 points. The over/under is 44. We'll start with the homebound Patriots, who have been disappointing this year. They might be 1-1, but man, that's a disappointing 1-1. I'm sorry, I have to say it.
No, it's true.
They haven't produced points, just point blank. They have not produced points. It's almost, and I put it in the show notes here. It's, will Baltimore stop them, or will New England stop themselves? Because if they're not making, I won't even say making the correct offensive calls, but if they're not executing, you can't do anything. You know, there's almost, as the defense, there's a chance you could stand out there, and the offense, you don't have to do anything special. The offense just won't convert. And Patriots seem to have kind of gotten that way this year. They're 20th in rush yards, but are 13th in attempts. It ain't working. 21st in pass attempts and 22nd in pass completions. It isn't really working. So the bright spot has been Jacoby Myers, and he's heavily questionable this week. Hunter Henry hasn't been used the way he should. Devontae Parker was added so he can basically stand on one side of the field when he comes out. I mean, Nelson Aguilar, I think it was, had 116 yards last week, and that's got to be it's obviously the first one to hit 100 yards this year, and nobody else has, but for the Patriots in any way. But Myers has had a target on 36% of his routes. Ravens are in the bottom third of the league in pass coverage. Again, throwing out that statistic last week when Hill and Waddle went absolutely nuts bonkers. I don't know. If Myers hasn't practiced all week and he doesn't play, I don't know who Mac Jones throws to. I don't know how you can trust Damian Harris or Ramondre Stevenson. You can't really rely on much of the third string. I don't even know who the third string wide receiver is there. It's probably Kendrick Bourne, probably.
Yeah, I was gonna say they have Kendrick Bourne. And honestly, when he's been out there and involved, in my opinion, he's been perfectly fine. And I know I'm a Pats fan and a little biased, but I feel like they have the pieces to be a competitive team.
Right.
And I mean, they also have a good defense. So like, they just really need to figure out what their offense is without McDaniels, and that has been a big struggle for them. And to your point, I don't know why they haven't involved Parker. It just seems like a waste if they're not going to actually use him the way he should be used,
right,
or at all.
Seemingly, right?
Yeah. So, they definitely need to get a game plan going here and figure out their offense. Because like I said, I think they have the pieces to be competitive. They don't really have. They're lost without McDaniels.
It's crazy to say that, but I guess it's and who's running their offense now? Is it?
I still haven't figured out if it's. I don't think it's one or the other. It's Patricia and Judge.
Okay, so they've combined to be one half each of an entire ineffective offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
Seemingly. The Patriots are tied for third worst offense through 2 games. They only have been They only beat out the Cowboys and the Colts. The Colts, of course, had the goose egg this past week in week 2, and the Cowboys basically had a goose egg in week 1. So Patriots are scoring; they're just not scoring enough.
Yeah.
It hurts. As for the Ravens, you could probably expect a good amount of running. They have a high-powered offense, obviously, led by Lamar Jackson. Deepest passer in the league so far, which I talked about last game. They really show no sign of missing Marquise Brown. And all in all, it seems like Devin Duvernay's doing just fine. Rashad Bateman's doing just fine. Mark Andrews is doing just fine. Lamar Jackson. I don't trust J.K. Dobbins in a fantasy aspect. If he comes back in this game, I don't think there's any running game outside of Lamar Jackson that's trustworthy. At least not the way this team's looking right now. And I think 2.5 points for Baltimore is a little low based on what we've seen so far this year. So I'm going to go Baltimore. I'm going to go Baltimore 28, Patriots 16.
Yeah. The Patriots are known for taking away like your top option, but the top option is Lamar Jackson, so you can't really take away the fact that he can run and throw the ball. The Ravens should have won again. Didn't. Dolphins played well. I feel like they should have won against the Dolphins with the way they started off that game, and then the Dolphins just really kicked it into like a whole other gear. So the Ravens are a very good team. Yeah, I see the Ravens winning, and I do think that even despite the Patriots having a good defense, 2.5 is too low of a spread.
Alrighty, moving on to the Lions, 1-1. Although it feels like 2-0 for them. They only lost by 3 to the Philadelphia in week 1, and they did handle business against the Commanders last week. They are traveling to the Vikings, who probably feel like it's 0-2. We played a very soft Green Bay team and won by 2.5 touchdowns in week 1, and then you get absolutely murdered by the Eagles last week. Minnesota's favored at 6 points. Over-under is at 52.5, and this is the second
It's time to
host games. Still shout out to Yu-Gi-Oh! Who remembers that from when they were like 10 years old on like CW or WB or whatever channel it was back then. Start with the Vikings on this one. Harrison Smith was ruled out today, so he's statistically the second best defensive player so far this year. Sorry, Eagles fans. Darius Slay isn't even in the top 10. But Harrison Smith will be out, and that's going to probably hurt a team that is already allowing a lot of yards per play. 4th in yards per play this year, going back to, I believe, week 15 of last year. They're actually still 6th, so they're not really much better. However, on the opposite side, Detroit, Goff only has 3 passes above 30 yards this year. So it's going to be kind of a back and forth for, do you throw it deep? I guess it's not even really back and forth. That's the decision. If Minnesota's defensive line can get to Goff, who doesn't move, he's in the pocket. He seems to trust his offensive line, but if they can get to him, it may cause him enough of an issue where he is going to throw errant passes, maybe more incomplete, or perhaps even his first interception of the year, might be second. But I see that as being a strong likelihood in this game versus last game. Zadarius Smith has played the middle of the field very well. And then Jordan Hicks and Danielle Hunter have kind of terrorized the outsides for the most part. They've done very well. Minnesota can continue offensively. They can continue to pass. Detroit is 7th in passing yards allowed this year. Again, you went up against Carson Wentz and Jalen Hurts can still run, but Jalen Hurts can still throw. And they're 4th in points allowed per game. Again, you gave up almost 30 to the Commanders and 38 to the Eagles. So I wouldn't take that too much to heart through just 2 games. Interesting note here, Detroit has allowed 13 running back receptions through 2 games, though, which could invite Dalvin Cook to finally get those passing receptions, or even Alexander Madison to get those passing receptions. And both teams give up plenty of first downs, which I think only adds to the fact that the over-under is so high. I don't see Minnesota being up by being 6-point favorites. I don't see Detroit being 6-point dogs. This could very well come down to a final drive in the last 2 minutes. It depends on if Kirk Cousins can be the Kirk Cousins consistency that we know him, and if Jared Goff can find weapons at different times when he needs to. And I think the defense will likely be the difference in this game. Who can interrupt the offense the best and make the quarterback ineffective?
Yeah. I mean, I think you nailed it on the head there. The offenses here have been well. Detroit has been pretty decent. Minnesota had a phenomenal week 1. Week 2, we'll try to forget for their sake. Yeah, honestly, I don't know that I have too much to add. I think, like I said, you nailed it there. It's going to come down to the defenses, which the Vikings should be better than they have been. And unfortunately, to your point with Harrison Smith being out, that is not great for them. Detroit, I wouldn't say they're that great of a defense, but they've honestly surprised a little bit. And Aiden Hutchinson had a great week too. Unfortunately, he's questionable, the rookie. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But I will say Adam Thielen, I mean, he's always been more of a touchdown or an end zone target for Kirk. I mean, he does get catches, but a PPR machine is not necessarily what he is there for. He's sometimes a safety net. He's mainly the end zone target. So he hasn't looked quite the same as he has in the past. I don't know if it's just the change in offensive coaching or if it's he's kind of on the decline. He's obviously an older receiver, 32, 33, I think. So I'm kind of favoring the Lions in this just based on what we saw in week 2 with the Vikings. And it's definitely recency biased. I mean, look at week 1. Maybe if week 2 didn't happen, I would be saying something different here. But the Lions have been consistent. The Vikings, something's going on there. They're not quite consistent. They're figuring some stuff out there. So
Right.
I think I might give this one to the Lions.
Okay, you got Lions. What would be your score?
I got Lions 26, Vikings 21.
Okay. Like in the 21s here. I got 2 of them in your first 2 games.
Yeah.
Detroit has it says they're 29th here based on their defensive efficiency, but that also includes rushing. They've only given up 500. I should say only. They've only given up 547 yards passing through 2 games so far this year, which is a lot less than the team right below them, being the Pittsburgh Steelers, giving up 756, which is just although that includes an extra game, so I shouldn't. I'm kind of with you on this one. Like as far as like being a toss-up, Minnesota's figuring some things out. We get that. If Justin Jefferson can get back on track, I guess, I think that makes a huge difference for Kirk Cousins. Interesting note, Adam Thielen has never gone 3 games in a row without a touchdown. I think it's been 3 years. I think I read that stat right earlier. It's been a long time. So if you're talking about him being a red zone target, this would be the week to dial him up over KJ Osborne, over Irv Smith. I'm gonna go. I think Goff ends up gotten to, so to speak. And I am gonna go Detroit losing this game. I'm gonna say Minnesota. It's gonna be last minute. I'm gonna go 30-28. I think Goff throws an interception, but we won't count that one because I don't have a stat or points for that. So just saying. So I'm gonna go Minnesota 30, Detroit 28. Because they both allow a bunch of first downs, and I think it's going to be. I think if anything, it'll be a high-scoring first half. I think the second half is where the defense will probably turn it up a little bit. It's just a guess, though.
Yeah.
No stat back that
up. I am kind of regretting going under the over/under here, but obviously I'm going to stick to my guns. I kind of feel like the Lions come back down to earth a little bit, and the Vikings, like I said, something's going on there.
Yeah, and it's not a bad to take the under here, because all it takes is a couple 3-and-outs and a couple of missed passes, drop passes, anything like that, and 26-21 is wholeheartedly in play. Moving on to our next football game, Eagles 2-0 traveling to Washington to take on the Commies, the Commanders, the 1-1 Commanders. Philadelphia favored by 6.5. The over/under is 47.5. I mean, there's really not much to say about Philadelphia. They have executed some damn good football.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a pretty good way to say it. Jalen Hurts just throws it, and then he runs when he can't throw it. And Miles Sanders is the RB7 on the year. Jalen Hurts is the non-RB 11. So they're 7-11 in rush yards so far this year, which is interesting because he's beating out quite a number of high-powered running backs who just haven't gotten the gears churning yet. Christian McCaffrey, I'm looking at you. I don't think there's anything that says this team can't go on and win, 12 games this year. I'll put the over under for that at 11, but 12 seems completely likely, or possible, I should say. On the other side, the Commanders need to not play like they did in the first half last week, where they just kind of didn't get a first down, didn't throw the ball, weren't very effective. Interesting to see how the backfield will turn in, Gibson versus McKissick. Detroit isn't very good versus running backs and receptions, and it kind of showed. J.D. McKissick and Gibson, I think, combined for like 10 out of the backfield. So it's interesting to see if they can keep that going against a much more active Eagles defense. I think much more active Eagles defense. And of course, the secondary for the Eagles is no slouch either. So, seeing Avonte Maddox and, you say a lot of these names, CJ Gardner Johnson, they've been very good at containing secondaries or wide receivers so far this year. What do you have to put on this game? Where are you looking fantasy wise? I guess this is the first game I think that would be, actually the second game that would be fantasy interesting to me.
I mean, I still like Curtis Samuel. I think his sort of Debo-esque style is something that will benefit the Commanders here, and something that the Eagles haven't really seen yet this year. Which, now that I think of it, Curtis Samuel, Debo Samuel. Anyways,
no relation.
Yeah, no relation, but it's interesting that they sort of are the two-headed monsters, or the gadget players, if you will. And they're both very good at it. Curtis actually probably having the better years so far, but anyways,
with that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's kind of crazy that Wentz is like, week 1 he was a top 3 QB, week 2 he was a top 5 QB. It's like, we've been here before. Are we about to get bit again? You think this is going to be a good game based on what they've done so far, but we all know that Wentz can kind of fall apart. And the first half of last week almost makes me feel like I don't want to trust him, but then he gets it done. So anyways, he's got great pieces here: Samuel, McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, the rookie. And I still think McLaurin is the number 1, and I think that is a huge benefit to Samuel and Dotson in terms of McLaurin getting more coverage. But something that I was just noticing in week 2, Dotson had 99% snap percentage, whereas McLaurin had like 89% and Samuel had 89%. So that was kind of interesting. It seems like they really like the rookie. He's been performing great. So it's not going to be a walk in the park. That's all to say. It's not going to be a walk in the park for the Eagles, but Jalen Hurts is just such a crazy dual threat, and they've been firing, or he's been firing on all cylinders. So this is going to be a fun game to watch. I honestly, I want to favor the Eagles, but Wentz kind of coming into a revenge game. Does he step up, or does it get in his head?
I wasn't going to say it, but I'm very glad that you did, because this is the first time that he has faced the Eagles since that trade.
Yeah.
And I think his first 2 games have proved he's not the slouch they traded away.
Mm-hmm.
Let's be fair, he pretty much was. I mean, he, no disrespect to him, great quarterback now, grew a lot, but he was not doing anything for Philadelphia back then. And it's good to see that he is now. Eagles second in the league in yards per play, 6.7 yards. They also are getting first downs at an incredible pace. They're second in the league in first downs, and they have literally 33% less plays than the number 1 team, which is the Cleveland Browns. Browns have 74 first downs to 210 plays. The Eagles 52 to 140 plays, which is, I mean, that's every third play they're getting a first down, which is almost a 100% score ratio when you walk it down the field. So, as far as the Commanders, keep going a little bit more. Like you said, Samuel, he has 8 more targets than Terry McLaurin, and he's run fewer routes. I don't think it's going to be sustainable, especially going forward. I think we talked on Tuesday about how can that team can defenses continue to just guard McLaurin and leave Curtis Samuel to run amok, and I don't think that's going to be the case for much longer. Washington is 30th in the league versus rushing going back to last year. Like I said, Jalen Hurts is 11th. Miles Sanders is 7th this year in rushing. Philadelphia, however, is 26th against running backs through 2 games this year. And despite Dalvin Cook's lackluster game last week. So, I think if you're looking at snap counts, McKissick had 46% of snaps versus Antonio Gibson's 54 last week. And it kind of shows in the receiving numbers. Game script means, they were down, so they needed a little bit more passing. So it kind of, explains that. But if Gibson versus McKissick, this is kind of going to be the tail here as far as the backfield, because I think from scratch they're going to probably go with McKissick a little bit. Philadelphia's allowed 11 running back receptions already this year, which is 5th, I believe, in the league, 4th or 5th. So interesting note to go over as far as that. What was I just going to say? I just brain farted entirely. Miles Sanders had 70% of carries, so I think he's clear RB1 territory as well. So just to spread that out. McKissick, Gibson, Sanders, Hurts for running. Lock and load, fantasy-wise, we'll talk about it. Lock and load, Curtis Samuel and A.J. Brown. Dallas Goedert, sneaky. Been very effective in 2 games this year. Anything else?
I think this game might actually go over.
Over 47.5?
Yeah.
I think it's very possible. I don't see any reason why that can't be. Like I said, the Eagles just march downfield so far in 2 games. I mean, granted, they haven't faced off like against a stellar defense like the Buccaneers or the Bills. But yeah, they seem to be marching downfield, and if the Commanders don't slouch, you could be in for a shootout here. So I don't hate that at all. Moving on, Chiefs 2-0 at the Colts, 0-3. Really, they lost twice last week. Might as well have. Matt Ryan threw so many interceptions, almost as many as Jameis Winston. Injury report: Michael Pittman is on track to make his return for the Colts. Shaq Leonard is out for his 3rd week. I heard that's his back. If I'm not mistaken. Alec Pierce is cleared from the concussion protocol, and he will make his return. So Indianapolis getting their top 2 wide receivers back, at least by depth chart. Alec Pierce might even be 3rd, but still. last week's that seemed to be a little bit of the issue for Matt Ryan. I mean, besides just making good throws and not turning the ball over, it's that he didn't have a lot of targets that he liked. It was Ashton Doolin and Paris Campbell put up a goose egg, and Naeem Hines had a few catches. Jonathan Taylor has a big rebound game to be had here. He kind of doo-dooed last week. Interesting to see with KC, who lost Willie Gay as one of their lead linebackers. He's out for 4 games due to a suspension. I believe they're going to have to turn to the rookie linebacker Leo Chanel, who is effective in college, but probably isn't Willie Gay yet. So it'll be interesting to see how Jonathan Taylor can get there. I think he will be a little more able to. I don't have anything to really back that up. Willie Gay, I believe, is an inside linebacker, so it would make a difference if the experience isn't there. On the other side, Kansas City, I think we talked about this pre-show. They've been spreading the ball immaculately. The Colts, as I've said in 2 games, and I'm going to say it for the 3rd one, they are very bad against tight ends. So you Travis Kelce fantasy owners, put your hat on because you're about to go for a ride. And I think he would probably have the highest ceiling he probably could have. I would be surprised if he doesn't have 8 to 10 catches, 100 yards, and a touchdown, if not 2, because they just don't guard tight ends apparently. The Kansas City run game has been kind of a jumble log so far. Jerick McKinnon has led the team in snaps. However, Clyde Edwards-Helaire has led the team in productivity. In Indianapolis, just hasn't been effective offensively. Statistically, the worst in the NFL this year. Hopefully, Pittman helps with that. And then my biggest take, though, is like I said, that defensive line and those linebackers versus Jonathan. Wow, yeah, Jonathan Taylor. Wow. Okay, I'm gonna go take a walk for a second. I almost just blanked on his name too. Anything else you have to add here? I have a couple other fun stats. Juju, his points he had horrible fantasy production last week, but his snaps were actually up, and he likely will be targeted by Kenny Moore, who has allowed 2 touchdowns and 9 catches in 2 weeks. If you needed any other reason to believe the Colts were not a defensive stalwart, there it is.
Yeah. I guess I'll just add it's kind of interesting that Valdez-Scantling has like one of the higher snap percentages, not by much, but he was 79% last week versus Juju like 74. But he's not really. I mean, like you said, they're spreading the ball around. Valdez-Scantling did have 7 targets, but he only caught 2 of them. So. He was somebody I was kind of targeting as a shot in the dark, a dart throw preseason. But anyways, point being, I don't know outside of Travis Kelce, there's a receiver that you can feel is truly safe on this team in terms of production. At least not what we've seen so far. After week 1, Patrick Mahomes said something about spreading the ball, and he's been doing that. So it's a different offense than what we're used to with Tyreek Hill not being here, obviously. And we've spoken about this a few times, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire is just not the fantasy running back you're looking for. Maybe he's fine for what they're trying to do. I would imagine they obviously want someone else based on what they're trying to do offensively, but he's just not. He's not an eye turner, I guess, is what I might say. Anyways, yeah, this is going to rely heavily on Patrick Mahomes being Patrick Mahomes, and I mean, they're not going to have an issue winning this game, but as a Jonathan Taylor owner, man, I really hope that Matt Ryan does not botch this year for him.
Well, he's not the pass catcher so much as he could be, and I think that's best for Jonathan Taylor. I'm going to real quick look up how Jonathan Taylor has done against the Chiefs, because I am interested to see how his games versus the Chiefs have been. But either way, rebound game coming up for Taylor. It just needs to be had for all of his fantasy owners. Let me see what we got here. Middle of the road. I'm not even going to glance too much into the stats, but it doesn't look like he's done amazing. So Matt Ryan needs a bounce back game. Jonathan Taylor needs a bounce back game. What else can you say, really? Yeah. I'm going to move on real quick and cover the Texans at the Bears. A over-under 39. Chicago favored by 3 points. Brandon Cooks is the only fantasy spot you can trust in this. He's had 10 targets in week 2. His season total now is 22. Bears rank in the bottom 5 teams versus coverage. The volume makes him a DFS play, and obviously throw him in leagues. David Montgomery had 6 runs of 10 yards last week and 8 broken tackles, which are first and second among all running backs, respectively. Texans just have a poor rush defense. Davis Mills versus Justin Fields. Probably not a good game to start either one. Brevin Jordan was officially listed out today, I believe.
Mhm.
Farrell Brown did not practice on Friday, and so all fingers could point to another O.J. Howard tight end game. The Bears don't have any receivers that I want any part of. So sorry, Cole Kmet. So sorry, Darnell Mooney. You have to score before I worry about you. I don't have any interest in this game at all from a fantasy standpoint. I'm sure Houston Texans and Chicago Bears fans will shake a fist at me, and I will continue to live my life. Anything else from you?
Yeah, Brandon Cooks, David Montgomery, really the only pieces I would go after. Damian Pierce trending upwards, but still not. Maybe a flex option at best.
Yeah, that's a good at best. I like that one. Neither of these offenses are high powered in any regard. So, what else do you say? What else do you really go on with? I'll take the Texans winning it, though. I'll say that. I know Chicago's favored by 3. I don't think that's accurate.
Yeah, I think I would agree.
Do we need to remind them that Justin Fields had 70 yards passing last week? And
Darnell Mooney had -4 yards.
Right, and he had more passing yards in that rain game that everyone said was so bad. Like literally double the amount of yards. Yeah, we remember that. Pepperidge Farm remembers. We're gonna take our final break. We're gonna come back, do the 4:25 games, the 2-night games, Monday Night Football. We're gonna do a quick 4 downs and our 5 fantasy flyers, and then we're gonna get out of here. More to come on the fantasy flyer. We'll see you on the other side of the break. I'm gonna hit the water cooler.
See you in a bit.
And back to part 3 of the fantasy flyer. Going to continue with our week 3 preview. Jaguars at the Chargers, both teams 1-1. Chargers now 3-point favorites, over under 42.5. It was up until like midday today a 7-point. Jaguars were 7-point dogs, and then it got 3 points. Probably something to do with Justin Herbert and the report coming out that he's questionable on limited practices. Keenan Allen questionable. I think that makes a huge difference for this game entirely. The Jaguars look very good against Carson Wentz. If Herbert doesn't play, and like you had mentioned earlier in our 9 segment, Chase Daniel's taking the first team snaps. I mean, that would indicate to me that he's probably in line to start, and I think that's probably why the over-under changed and why the spread changed.
Mm-hmm.
If they're without Herbert, I think just about everybody except for maybe Austin Eckler is probably hampered in some way. I guess Gerald Everett, maybe if you wanted a dart throw, but Chase Daniel is not Justin Herbert. We both know that.
Yeah, I think I would still play Williams without if Keenan Allen is out. Williams is definitely more of a boomer bust guy, but with Keenan Allen being out last week, he was dominant. He's a very talented guy. Obviously, high draft capital was first round. So I think I would still play him, but yeah, without Herbert, that definitely hampers things. And if you have better options, by all means,
Line them up.
yeah.
Christian Kirk, clear wide receiver 1 for Jacksonville. Lock and load, 3 touchdowns in 2 weeks, I think. Two touchdowns, but he has very good efficiency in the red zone. So going to be the pass option for Trevor Lawrence. I don't have anything else to add to this game. If Herbert doesn't play, I think the Jaguars win this game. I don't think Chase Daniel, who's he's been a traveler for a while, I don't think he's in line to really step on the field and Cooper rush it, so to speak.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay. Moving on to the second 425 game. The 1-1 Rams at the 1-1 Cardinals. Rams are 3.5-point favorites. The over/under at 48.5. I just said this to you before we came back from break. This game last year, we would be setting up the popcorn, breaking out the big screen TV, putting on a jersey. We would be having a ball to see this matchup. And this year, it just seems like two deflated balloons facing off against each other. The Rams almost let the Falcons come back last week. Matthew Stafford is tied for the lead league, or is in the lead league solely for interceptions already this year through 2 weeks. Not a good start. The Cardinals have a little bit of momentum after coming off the win versus the Raiders, where they put up 20 points in the final frame and then went on to win it in overtime on a 54-yard fumble return by Byron Murphy. Kyler Murray is expected to be without Rondale Moore. Interesting stat about Zach Ertz is he has the best tight end usage so far through 2 weeks. And he has several red zone targets. I think he has pop it back up. He has 11 he had 11 targets last week, just last week alone. So, and he's number 1 in tight end usage. I would say if he's on your free agent wire, don't be shy. Kyler Murray is 20th in yards thrown this year. He's missing his wide receivers, his speed wide receivers, and even in the case of DeAndre Hopkins, you could say he's missing some of that space out there that he can create. But neither team's really good against opposing quarterbacks, so I don't really know what to make of this game. I would put the Rams ahead just because Kyler Murray seems to be all over the place. The Cardinals seem to be all over the place. They get blown out by the Chiefs in week 1. Looks like they're going to get blown out in week 2 and scrape up something. So I would put the Rams winning this game. That'd be my bet. And I will say Allen Robinson, Cooper Kupp, go to town. Best of luck guessing which running back between Henderson and Akers will get the most carries. And then, like you had mentioned earlier with James Conner, if he's out, Darrell Williams got the red zone. You're going to be pay dirt or broke. Benjamin gets kind of the first down carries, mostly some pass catching, and then Greg Dortch. That's all I got for this one.
Yeah, I would agree. Rams probably take this on paper with all the people out on the Cardinal side. I think that's the safer bet. Some of the things you brought up, yeah, Matthew Stafford has the most interceptions, 5, followed by Burrow and Matt Ryan with 4. And Ertz was kind of a little injured in week 1, so his snap percentage went from 60 to 84% between week 1 and week 2. So, yeah, Ertz definitely not. Don't count him out yet. He might be a little bit on the aging side, but they still like him there, and he's producing. And I know they have McBride, but he's still a rookie, and tight ends take a while to really get going in this league. So yeah, Ertz not a bad stab with some of the people out on the Cardinal side, and Dortch has gotten it done 2 weeks in a row. So yeah. Ooh.
All right, moving on to our next game in the 4:30 slate. The 1-1 Packers traveling to Tampa Bay take on the Buccaneers, who are 2-0. Tampa Bay is a 1-point favorite. over under at 42 points. And this is the third of our host v host.
It's time to
Yes, it is. Buccaneers they have several injuries. Just be frank about it. Godwin did not practice all week. He's likely out. Mike Evans is suspended because he got fisticuffy. Julio Jones did not practice at all this week, or did not practice, then was limited for once. I don't know. He's probably not going to play. Russell Gage was limited in practice, which leaves you Rashad Perryman and Cole Beasley, likely, maybe Cole Beasley. Otherwise, you're looking at Scotty Miller. Did I say
Yeah,
that?
I was actually just reading Perryman is also listed as questionable.
Yeah, I remember seeing some. I don't think it was anything to worry. Actually, they put Tom Brady on the injury report. He said he's going to play. So, Tampa Bay is ranked first in defense so far this year, which helps to cover up that lackluster O-line that has seen better days. The one thing you know about Tom Brady is he's going to take care of the football, but it's going to be hard to move the ball so much when he doesn't have his top three receivers. Mike Evans was guarded fairly well last week. Chris Godwin wasn't there. It was a very low-scoring first half. Meanwhile, on the other side, Green Bay, they've run the ball, I think, more than any other team. I think they have 314 rush yards through 2 games, which makes sense because, they don't have Devontae Adams anymore. They don't have that deep threat. There'll be no Sammy Watkins this week for Green Bay, which leaves you down to Alan Lazard, who seems to be comfortable with the offense. He'll probably be covered by statistically the best cornerback of the year so far in Jamel Dean. Then it comes down to Randall Cobb, Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson. Matt LaFleur had hinted that Romeo Doubs should get a bigger role. I think he's kind of stepped out a little bit more convincingly, I guess, than Christian Watson. I mean, I know we're only talking 2 games in, but it seems like Doubs has been there a little bit more than Christian Watson has. Could just be a slow start for Christian Watson and a fast start for Doubs. But on the running back side, Aaron Jones has been picking up some extra work in the pass game while also splitting carries with A.J. Dillon. Dillon's been a top 20 running back despite splitting his carries, which is good. I mean, that's kind of, you have 2 valuable backs in the backfield. And then it just comes down to whether they can defensively, Green Bay can attack Tom and attack this weak O-line. I don't really have a whole bunch more on my plate that I can see that breaks this game down. Cameron Brate's a dart throw for fantasy. If you don't have Evans, you don't have Jones, you don't have Godwin, you could split a lot of targets in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. I don't know. For Tom's sake, he may want to say his injury is a little more serious and sit this one out because he's got nobody. But yeah, I still don't really see how Buccaneers are 2-0. But I mean, I guess it is Tom Brady and he hates to lose, so he'll figure it out. But they have a huge problem with getting weapons for him on the field. And the Packers are trending in the right direction of figuring out their offense without Devontae Adams. It's kind of a battle of who's going to get some touchdowns, Aaron Jones or A.J. Dillon. It's basically been one or the other each week. Aaron Jones having a rushing and a receiving one last week, and A.J. Dillon having the rushing one week 1. To your point about Christian Watson, he's just been kind of battling a little bit more with the injuries than Romeo Doubs. So I think, there's been a bit more of a connection there that he's been able to build with Rodgers, which is obviously something that Rodgers values highly. So it's kind of Doubs and Tunyon, the running backs, and then maybe Cobb and Watson sprinkled in here. And actually, did we say Alan Lazard? He's back. He's good to go. So
Yeah,
okay.
I think he's going to end up getting Jamel Dean, who's, I think the passer rating I saw earlier today that he's allowing this year is like 19.2. So not good for Alan Lazard. It doesn't really matter who he's on. Whoever he covers, it's not going to be a fun time based on how the first two games went.
Yeah.
Granted, it's been, like I said, Dak Prescott, a sprinkle of Cooper Rush, and then a beaten up Jameis Winston. So this will be the best quarterback play that I think they've seen. Not even I think it's pretty clear this is the best quarterback play that they will see. It just depends on how Aaron Rodgers can continue. If he can continue, they've in the last 5 quarters that the football that the Packers have played, they have drawn back from this big play, let's throw it 40 yards and hope it sticks, to this inch down the field, screen pass, run up the middle, outside run, misdirection, go back to a screen pass, maybe hit a short slant. I think Rodgers doesn't. I don't know the stat behind it, but he can't have too many throws past 40 yards in the last 5 quarters, or 20 yards, excuse me. So I would hope that if that continues, Green Bay has a really good shot of not only winning time of possession, but winning the football game. The other thing I didn't mention about Tampa Bay, which is important, is that Leonard Fournette was 90% of the runs through the first 2 weeks. Touchdown, and I think he could be edging towards another pass catching role this week with the depleted wide receivers. It's a 4th option between the ones we've already mentioned for them. If Cole Beasley plays, if Cole Beasley doesn't, then like, all right, so Rashad Perryman and Cameron Brate and Leonard Fournette and Scotty Miller, I guess you can throw Scotty, but I'm putting him behind Fournette. I think Tom Brady ends up breaking out the old playbook from last year, and you're going to see some 10, 12, 14, 16-yard screen passes to Fournette.
Yeah, I mean, in general, they've been running the ball a lot more than they have in the past. So, yeah, yeah. I mean, I'll give you my score. I actually have the Packers winning this kind of decidedly. Packers 24, Bucks 17. The lack of options don't give me a lot of faith in the Bucks.
Yeah, we saw that kind of. You said 24-17?
Yes.
Okay. So I went Green Bay 23-19.
Oh, well. Okay.
We're not far off, because I think both teams at certain points will struggle to score through this game. So that's very interesting that we both went that close for score. But moving along, Falcons at the Seahawks. Falcons are 0-2. Seahawks are 1-1, but it probably feels like 0-2. Well, maybe not. You beat Russell Wilson, and maybe that feels like 2 wins. I don't know. Last check, this game was even. It was a break even between. There was no spread. I think that's probably changed. It could go. I've heard 1.5 Falcons. I've heard even, obviously. Over/unders 42. We'll touch on the important pieces of this game because it's not super interesting. Geno Smith, throw the ball sometimes. This is a team you can run on. So run the ball too. Rashad Penny and Kenny Walker kind of split carries last week. You had Travis Homer come in there, but Homer was more or less on passing downs towards the end of the game when the game script called for it. So I think this is the first game you're going to kind of see where the two, given that Walker was out week 1, where you're going to be kind of see who gets the more of the lead on the carries. They do have many ways to attack Lockett and Metcalf. Lockett has seen, where's my stat, 15 targets with 12 receptions in his first 2 weeks, 10 of them last week. Noah Fant and Will Dissly have been really under-targeted, but the Falcons have allowed 12.5 points per game to tight ends this year between 2 games, allowed 10 per game last year, fantasy points. So whoever, you could get one or both of them to the almost 10-point range. It's not out of the realm of possibility. The Falcons secondary has been kind of a bright spot, excuse me. But I think Seattle is going to edge more towards running here as far as attacking Atlanta. On the other side, Kyle Pitts as probably his best opportunity to have a game where we can mention Kyle Pitts in a non-negative connotation. It's not good when you're put up against Cole Kmet and you both have like 4 receptions on the year. It's true. Seattle 17th in the league versus tight ends. And of course, Drake London at this point is clear wide receiver 1, 41% target share, which is really unsustainable. But even if he drops to 30 to 33%, you can see Kyle Pitts soaking in the rest of those. And as long as Mariota can stay open, Atlanta has shown it has potential with the youth early on this year. So I kind of understand why the line is even. Fantasy-wise, if it's not London, if it's not Pitts, if it's not Lockett, I don't think I have much interest in anything to go on with this game.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to rule out Metcalf with the talent and the size, but through 2 games he has like 10.5 fantasy points. Looking at like half PPR, he has a total of 13 targets, I think. Yeah.
Well, this is something I wrote on the script, which I forgot to even bring up. But Metcalf saw 6 targets last week to 7 in week 1, but his average distance at target went from 4.1 yards to almost 10, which is big because that increases the big play chance. It's obviously a sign that things are trending up for Metcalf. I think it just depends on which wide receiver do you want to attack as far as the Falcons, and does Geno Smith see the other one at the time that you're going to maybe, I guess I'll say, overwhelm whichever other wide receiver. So if you overwhelm Lockett, can Geno see Metcalf for a 20 or 30-yard pass? Because I think that's possible.
Yeah. I mean, Pete Carroll did say something about wanting to open up the offense a little bit more, but we all know Pete Carroll, and just kind of, I won't call him a liar, but he doesn't always, he's a very optimistic guy when it comes to injuries, and when it comes to something like this, I don't know. I'm definitely taking this with a grain of salt, but who knows if he's throwing like a jab at Russ for leaving.
Open up the offense, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't have anything else fantasy wise from this game. You?
No, there's not a lot I want here.
Perfect. Moving on to Sunday Night Football, 1-1 49ers at the 1-1 Broncos. The 49ers favored 1.5 points. The over/under at 43.5. George Kittle is going to make his season debut. He said he was pretty excited today. I don't doubt it, because watching your football team play wasn't bright with Trey Lance. I think the not so public yet still public thought that there's more hope with Jimmy G is going to be a reality. Let's see. Interesting to see how George Kittle coming back plays into Brandon Ayuk's targets. We've seen Debo take a little bit more of a running back approach at times, not entirely. And it's helped Brandon Ayuk be an efficient wide receiver, the wide receiver we probably expected to see last year. Kittle will, I would imagine, see 6 to 10 targets. If I'm in a league, I would probably, as soon as Kittle it came out that Kittle was going to come back, I probably would have tried to sell on Ayuk. Just my take on it, because I think even with Debo still out there and George Kittle, Ayuk probably can't sustain his, I think, 8.5 targets per game, 9 targets. Jimmy G he's not going to hurl it 40 times a game. I doubt in any way. Jeff Wilson is the running back starter for the 49ers. I can't imagine Marlon Mack comes in there and takes a 50% snap count from him. Wilson was pretty productive last week with no Ty Davis-Price. Jordan Mason barely got to smell his pads. So I would go with Jeff Wilson as the start. If you have Jeff Wilson on your bench and you need that running back help, don't be shy. Denver, however, they'll have to fill in for a likely missing Jerry Jeudy. It doesn't look promising for him, but there was no problem with Cortland Sutton's production. KJ Hamler was questionable, but I believe he is set to play.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So, and then it comes down to the third through eighth options, which are all equally as unlikely yet likely, which we listed on Tuesday's show. And I remember absolutely none of their names because they're not fantasy relevant. All huge dart throws. But Russell Wilson, Javonte Williams, Melvin Gordon. Williams, I think, took the snap count last week. Williams being effective in the passing game was very decent at the run game too, against the Texans. And now Denver can come to a 49ers team that moves the ball at their own pace, is kind of creative with Kyle Shanahan. And the Denver defense is coming into week 3 with 3 of the top 7 blitzers through 2 games, Bradley Chubb being one of them. They try and get after the quarterback and force pressure. I don't know. Jimmy G isn't mobile. I think with Trey Lance, that wouldn't be as big of a thing. But if you have Jimmy G, he's not going to run like Trey Lance. So, some short passes to Jeff Wilson, who had 22% of his routes through 2 games. He had a target on him. And then it comes down to Debo and George Kittle. So I'm intrigued to see how this game goes, but I also don't have a whole heck of a lot of fantasy interest outside of Jeff Wilson, depending on his price on DK or FanDuel. George Kittle, who will probably be priced low. I do see him taking in 6 to 8 targets easy tomorrow. Almost tomorrow. Yeah, it's 12:01 a.m. So yes, it is. And then for the Broncos, it's Cortland Sutton and Javonte Williams for me.
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of talking from a daily fantasy, from fantasy in general, like fantasy football lineups, and you probably have some of these guys. Yeah, you're cringing. I mean,
yes, from daily fantasy, but even for leagues, like how can you start Melvin Gordon with great? I mean, okay, it depends on who else is on your roster.
Yeah,
but
I would say Melvin Gordon's probably somebody that you drafted and is would be consideration for your flex spot. I mean, he's been getting decent amount of carries, not so much involved in the passing game.
So let me pose this to you. Let me cut you off right here. Let me pose this to you: Melvin Gordon or Brashad Perriman?
Melvin Gordon.
Really?
Yeah, it just Perryman. He had like.
I guess okay. So let me ask that. You know that Julio Jones is out, and Cole Beasley's not playing because I think Beasley's more important than Perryman if Beasley plays. Beasley doesn't play. Julio, who's probably going to be out, is out. Who else are going to throw to? Brashad Perriman took like 40% snaps, had 3 for 45 and a touchdown last week. Melvin Gordon, who's not even getting red zone carries anymore.
Yeah, I guess I would just say without that touchdown, Perryman has like 7.5 points.
Right. That's fair.
Whereas Melvin's been consistently, and that was that's full PPR. Melvin's been.
Oh yeah.
Melvin's been about around there. I guess in my head, what's that?
The ceiling. I'm sorry.
The ceiling. You're probably right on the ceiling.
Well, you're going flex. You might as well at that point.
Yeah, exactly. If you're going flex, yeah, you've talked me into it. I was coming from a standpoint of known usage. Melvin's been getting 12 and 10 carries respectively, week 1, week 2. If he gets that touchdown, I think he would end up with more points than Perryman, even if Perryman gets a touchdown. But yeah, I think you're right in terms of upside. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the San Francisco side with Jimmy G in there, everybody sort of gets a boost in my opinion, because Jimmy G doesn't have the running capability that Lance does. So you're relying on Wilson to do the running. You're relying on Debo to do the running. You're relying on Kittle to make the catches and Debo and even possibly Ayuk. I mean, it wasn't the case when Jimmy G played previously that Ayuk was this involved. So to your point, you may see him take a step back, especially with Kittle coming off injury. So I think this is good for all those pieces. Jimmy G being QB.
Can't hate on it. I feel like Kittle is a huge piece to that offense that they've been missing,
Mhm.
and that's partially painful. Not painful. That's a bad word, but it's understating it. Like they went out and won versus Seahawks 27-7 last week. In week 1, they lost to the Bears in the rain,
Yeah.
and not to say that Kittle would have made the difference in that game wholeheartedly, but there was a big difference in there's a big difference in the play that happened in the rain where you didn't have a secure pass catcher at times. I don't know. Maybe I'm overhyping Kittle a little bit, but I see him making a huge difference to this pass game. That also big difference here is Jimmy G's familiar with him. Trey
Exactly.
Lance Trey Lance has mostly no clue, besides a couple games last year. So
Yeah. No, I would definitely agree that Kittle is a difference maker when he's on the field. So,
yeah.
um, I'm also wondering if this ends up going over, just because if both these teams are on, it's week 3. Hopefully they're figuring things out, especially the Broncos.
Right.
I could see both these offenses putting up some points.
Well, let me see here real quick. The Broncos are 18th in first downs, and let's see. I want to see real quick how many yards they've together, because I don't think they were very low scorers. Week 1, obviously. San Francisco is 16th in yards. Broncos are 9th. Okay, so yeah, I could see the over. I could see the over in this one. Yeah, that's not out of the realm of possibility. If Jimmy G can step right back into where he should be, there's and Russell plays better than he did the first 2 quarters last week. 100%, this could be an over game. I'm not opposed to that at all. Last game on our slate, Monday Night Football. The Dallas Cowboys at 1-1 versus the 2-0 Giants in New York. The Giants are 1-point favorites. The over/under is 39. Kayvon Thibodeau is expected to make his long-awaited debut. Dalton Schultz, I believe, is trending towards being out. I know he's still questionable, but that was the last report I had read this afternoon. I don't know if that's changed. Michael Gallup, on the other hand, is trending to make his debut. I don't have a lot of interest in this game from a fantasy standpoint. Zeke is too volatile, not fragile. I mean, maybe fragile too, but he's too volatile. CD Lamb with Cooper Rush seems like the best bet you're going to get for the Cowboys. You could bring up Tony Pollard, and I would say he saw a target on over 50% of the routes he ran last week, and that's not sustainable. And Zeke outsnapped him 67% to 39%. So I'm not entirely sold on that point yet. Cooper Rush, if you don't have a better quarterback, that's okay. He played well. The Giants aren't exactly defensive, menaces. On the Giants side, you mentioned it earlier in our 9 segment. Wandale and Tony are questionable with, injury A, B, C, and D. I don't think I think Sterling Shepard's the wide receiver 1. I think we know Kenny Galladay is frustrated because he's not getting targets, and I don't think the Giants care because he's so far past his prime. It's in a rocker. It just seems that way. And the Lions kind of read it, right? This happened 3 years ago, almost 2 years ago. So I don't have anything else really from this game. Daniel Jones has been effective at taking care of the football, and Saquon Barkley probably going to have to deal with, I would imagine, between Leighton Vander Esch and Micah Parsons, maybe even bring. I don't know if Jalen Kearse is going to play. I don't think he played last week, but if he does, you might even see some spies from the second. But that's the only way you can really attack Saquon if they're going to make gaps for him. So I say lock and load on Saquon. I say lock and load on CD. Zeke, be patient with him. I am. I'm his fantasy owner. I'm being patient because it's Zeke. I don't have anything really else to add for you.
Yeah, not a heck of a lot. I think you're right about Sterling Shepard probably being the number one, and I mean, looking at week 1 and week 2 for him, decent amount of targets, more so in week 2. He had 10 targets, caught 6 of them, but the offense is not super explosive. So unless he breaks something off or gets a touchdown, he would potentially be in flex consideration. So yeah, not a whole heck of a lot here. I like.
Yeah, I can't think of anything else I'm missing. You might be able to take the Cowboys defense here. If you held a gun to my head and told me to take a defense this week, the Cowboys would be one to take. And based on the past week performances, I would probably take the Chiefs.
Yeah, if Justin Herbert's out, Jaguars.
Yeah, okay, I'm with that. That's another option. Those would probably be my 3, DFS defenses. But that is our entire week 3 slate. We are going to move on to our 4 downs segment. We're going to give you 5 fantasy flyers, and we're going to wrap it up. Do you want to go with your 4 downs first, or should I?
Yeah, I can kick it off.
Okay, you want to go with?
Drake London finishes week 3 as the number 1 wide receiver.
Okay.
Amon-Ra has more yards again this week than Justin Jefferson. Carson Wentz finishes week 3 again as a top 5 quarterback. And Cooper Rush outscores Tom Brady in week 3 from a fantasy perspective.
Ooh. Okay, so you have Cooper Rush over Tom Brady in fantasy points. I'm not ranking them. I'm just reading them back.
Mhm.
Amon-Ra has more yards than Justin Jefferson.
Mm-hmm.
Give me the other 2 again.
Drake London finishes week 3 as the number 1 wide receiver. And I'll stick this all in like the fantasy bucket, fantasy football. Carson Wentz finishes week 3 as a top 5 QB again.
Oh. Most likely. Man. I'm going to say most likely Carson Wentz finishes top 5 fantasy.
It's so crazy to say, right?
I mean, so you have 2 that are kind of, I mean, not really. You have Amon-Ra versus Justin Jefferson. Same game, right?
Right.
So they're directly facing off against each other in the same football field at the same time. And like I said before, I think Jared Goff comes back to earth a little bit. I think you said that, but same concept, right? So I'm gonna. And Tampa Bay has to face off against Green Bay. I would put that Amon-Ra out with more yardage than Justin Jefferson second. I would put Cooper Rush over Tom Brady third, and I would put Drake London as wide receiver 1 last, least likely, because there are about 6 other wide receivers that I can see scoring a boatload more yards than Drake London. Not to say that he's not, like I said, not fantasy relevant, but the Seahawks have not scored a lot, and they have a slow pace when they play these football games. They just don't move so much. So my four downs. George Kittle will get 20 fantasy points in return and lead San Francisco fantasy scorers. Down number 2. Tua has less than 250 passing yards this week. Down number 3. Dalvin Cook has a receiving and a rushing touchdown versus Detroit. And down number 4, Curtis Samuel has more fantasy points than A.J. Brown.
Okay. Interesting. That's actually really funny. You have another wide receiver versus wide receiver in the same game.
Yep. And both of them I think are valid questions, both from a
Yeah.
fantasy football standpoint.
Yeah, for sure. Damn. I will go Dalvin Cook having a receiving and rushing touchdown as most likely, followed by so you said Kittle has 20 points and leads the
And
team.
leads San Francisco. Yes, fantasy scores.
If it was just lead the team, I would probably.
I gave you a good one.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I'll put my second as Curtis Samuel, more points than AJ Brown, followed by George Kittle, followed by Tua, less than 200 yards.
Okay. So you think, all right, so yeah, which I like that. I like that.
Here's a guy that has a deep understanding.
Yeah, he does. It's just completely true. We're going to move on to our final segment, our 5 fantasy flyers. I will start off. My first one is OJ Howard. There's a missing piece and a half. I'm going to go with OJ Howard from the Texans. I think Davis Mills has found him a little bit more enticing to throw to. So I'm going to start off with OJ Howard. Your turn.
I'm going to throw out Dontrell Hilliard. He had that decent week 1 and then was out week 2. It seems like he was a planned part of the offense to a degree. And maybe that's part of why they didn't have as much success in week 2. I don't know that that's exactly the reason why, but he seems like they want to get him involved. So I'll throw him out there.
All right. My third is going to be Greg Dortch. If the first 2 times you don't like it, you should probably try on the third. He has a touchdown and 9 receptions over his last 2 weeks. He's gone for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns in those same 2 games. I'm going Greg Dortch for our third fantasy flyer. You have number 4.
All right. I got a couple here. Which one do I want? I'm gonna go Marcus Mariota.
Okay.
He had a pretty decent week 1. He's got some rushing capability, and I think that the matchup this week is very good, which is also why I threw out Drake London. So I think he has a decent game. So from we've said this before, but QBs are kind of if you wait till the end of your draft and you take somebody, there's a lot of streaming options. I think Mariota might be a good streaming option this week.
Sounds good. And the last one we should probably agree on, just so it's fair, and we each get 2.5. The 2 that come to mind: Rashad Perryman, because I've said it I don't know how many times, and Jeff Wilson. Wilson's probably more suited for it given his targets and his carries. So I agree with Jeff Wilson if you are happy with it.
Yeah, I would take him over Perryman.
I like it. So those are our 5 fantasy flyers. There they go. That's going to wrap it up for episode 6 of the Fantasy Flyer. We are going to be back on Tuesday reviewing all of this. All of these games, see how all of this comes. We're going to go over our host v host. We're probably going to play a little name game or top flop drop. Either way, I'm going to be Derek signing off. On your side.
Good luck in week 3. Peace out.